Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to take you into the pit lane, straight into the world of roaring engines, split-second decisions, and life and death stakes. Because behind that glamour, behind the triumphant checkered flags, lie stories so harrowing they will pull you into the shadows of what happens when everything that can go wrong does go wrong. I want to tell you 3 true pit stop horror stories, real moments that shattered composure, that forced hearts to pound, that left scars, physical, mental, moral. I want to shake you awake, because these aren't war stories, these are racing stories, and they remind us how fragile life is, how imperceptibly thin the line between control and calamity. The first story is from the 24 Hours of Le Mans, that legendary endurance race where cars and drivers are pushed to their limits for a full day, in darkness and daylight, under rain and heat. In 2017, near the end of one of the night stints, a pit stop for fuel and tires was scheduled for car number 58, a factory team Porsche. Everything seemed routine: some cold air under the headlights, mechanics in fireproof suits, the hum of generators. But what no one had expected was a failure in the fuel hose coupling, a microscopic crack that had gradually split from fatigue. When the fuel rig operator inserted the nozzle, high-pressure jet sprays burst out not into the tank, but into a mechanic's gauntlet, into the sleeve of his suit. For a fraction of a second, no one perceives what's happened. Then the smell of burning fabric. Then the scream, sharp, primal. He stands frozen, his hand swallowed by flame, his colleague scrambling, fuel still pouring, lights glaring. Someone smothers the blaze with a fire blanket. Someone else hits the emergency shutoff. The driver, unaware, sits in the cockpit, his mind still on the track. Meanwhile, this man's glove is melting, fingers blistering. By the time medics arrive, he is in shock, pain overriding everything. That single second of failure, that tiny crack, has turned a normal pit stop into a battleground. Afterwards, when the team tries to piece together how it happened, they find the crack started weeks before, microscopic, nearly invisible, formed under vibration, stress, cold nights, repeated usage. They find the metal fatigue signs missed in inspection. And they find the human cost: months of recovery, nights of nightmares, guilt for something so preventable. The man returns to the pits, scarred, cautious, but always hearing the hiss of gas in his dreams, always remembering that moment when something entirely routine turned unforgiving. The second horror comes from NASCAR in a summer heat of 2014 in Daytona. The pit stop is faster than a blink tightrope. For tires, fuel, adjustments, all in less than 15 seconds. One crew member backs up to change the right rear tire. The jack man lifts. Another man approaches to pump the jack again, to seat the new tire. A single miscommunication. Someone thought the car had cleared. Someone else thought the car was safe to move. The driver, needing to exit, releases the clutch. The car surges forward while the mechanic's leg is still in the car's path. There is a gasp, a sickening crunch.
Bone.
Muscle. Silence. The car stops. The mechanic falls to the ground, screaming, his face ashen, his leg nearly severed. Everyone freezes for a moment. Then chaos. Medics, paramedics, frantic calls. The driver collapsing against the steering wheel, tears in his eyes, nearly uncomprehending. He survives, thank God, but not unscathed. He loses part of his calf. Months of rehab follow. The mental wound, though, is deeper. That moment when your own flesh is betrayed by motion you had helped enable. The driver is haunted by the sound of bones giving way. The fellow crew member who signaled clear is haunted too. He didn't see the leg. He didn't hear the scream. But the silence that followed, that emptiness, never stopped echoing. The third horror, Formula 1, 2008, Singapore Grand Prix, during the now infamous night race. The team, pushing flawlessly for months, pits one of their drivers. Everything is precisely timed. Tires change, the wings flap, the tires are warmed, cross-thread checks made. Then one of the pneumatic wheel guns misfires. In the blink of a neon light, the gun fires off a burst, tearing through the tire wall, launching the nut into the chest of a lollipop man, someone holding the pit stop board telling the driver when to go. The nut strikes with horrific velocity. You see bodies flinch, you see dust and rubber spray. You see the board fall away. The man staggers back, bleeding, clutching his ribs. The driver, seeing the blood through the window, almost doesn't move, paralyzed. The team scrambles, first medical team, then ambulance. The man is airborne in agony, the pain beyond speech, then panic as comrades cluster around him in shock. They learn later the gun had been miscalibrated. An internal valve failed, causing a pressure surge. The small nut, meant to be a safe projectile in theory, became something lethal. The man recovers, but his ribs are shattered, his lungs bruised. His breath, when he takes it in, is an echo of that blast. He sleeps poorly, haunted by the image of that metal nut flying where nothing should fly. He wonders, each morning, how close he was to death. 3 stories, 3 nightmares, 3 reminders that even at the height of human achievement, errors compound, that pride and speed, while exhilarating, are fragile masks over mortal flesh. Tonight, I tell them so you won't forget, so you will understand what it means when the spotlight fades and mechanics move in silence, when every second matters, when every decision is paid in sweat and vulnerability. Because in these stories, what terrifies isn't only the physical toll, it is the collapse of assumed safety, the betrayal of trust, the moment trust vanishes, and what is left is raw, exposed, terrified humanity. The crack in the hose, the surge of the car, the misfired gun, each is a reminder that perfection is an illusion, that even a slight misreading, a momentary lapse, can cascade into horror. I remember watching the replay of that first story, seeing the hose buckle, seeing that spray of fuel, seeing the mechanic flinch, my breath caught. I remember in the second-by-second countdown, the signals exchanged, the unspoken assumptions, the legs still touching metal, the instant the car lurched. I remember knowing in that moment no one is to blame solely because no one foresaw beauty could turn brutal. And in the third, seeing that nut spin off like an icy curse, flying, and someone you could see in the pit, someone alive one moment, nearly gone the next. These moments also shake the notions of heroism. The heroes aren't only the drivers speeding past stands, they're the men and women crouched beside the car, under pressure, with only instincts and training, hoping nothing goes wrong, praying the machinery holds, praying the sequence is perfect. But in those moments I mentioned, heroism flips into horror because uncertainty wins. I want to feel their skin, their fear, the scent of burnt fuel, the howl of pain. I want you to feel it too, not because I want to scare you for the sake of it, but because there is value in fear, there is truth in vulnerability, there is humility in witnessing what could happen. Many of us believe in control over our lives, our jobs, our relationships. We believe that if we work hard, stay precise, check the bolts, follow the protocol, we will be safe. These pit stop stories remind us how rare safety is. They remind us how thin the line is, how fragile. Imagine the first mechanic, fire burning his arm, thinking, I trained for this, I inspected, I wore the gloves, and yet that small crack, imperceptible, decreed his suffering. Imagine the second, seeing a colleague's leg crushed, the crunch he will carry forever in dreams. Imagine the third, hearing the ping of the nut, then everything turning red, then the rattling breath of someone who didn't expect to bleed. How do you live after that? How do you touch metal and oil and fire again? Some never do. Some quit the sport. Some stay, but they change. They inspect more, they demand more, they sleep less. They are consumed by memories. The hiss, the crash, the whir of a machine gone rogue. Their bodies physically heal, but their minds bear traces. Nightmares, flinches when a hose moves, sweat when the heat hits, dread when something is routine. And the cost falls also on those who watch, the family, the children, the friends. The wife who sets a plate for 2, waiting for the man who may never return from the pits. The son who looks up to a dad in fireproof overalls, not knowing what shadows he carries home. Because the trauma doesn't stay in pits, it follows you home, seeps into your dreams, turns routines into dread. These stories are also about the comradeship in crisis. In every crisis, someone reaches out, A hand over flame, a shoulder under bleeding ribs, someone holding the signal board when everyone else is froze. The man whose leg was crushed, his teammates carried him, lifted his body, carried him out of pain even as he screamed for the world to stop. The mechanic burnt was enfolded in blankets, cooled, spoken to, someone whispering, "You're okay?" Even though okay felt like a lie. The man struck by the nut was surrounded by gloves, shock blankets, people pooling around him, even strangers, in that moment of absolute terror. And yet, after the crisis, life continues. The race cars still roar. The crowds still cheer. The drivers still push the limits. The mechanisms still tick. But each person who's seen those horrors carries a weight. They learn humility. They respect the hoses, the guns, the signals, the bolts. They multiply their checks. They double their training. They question each assumption. What do these stories tell us beyond racing? They tell us what it means to live with uncertainty, what it means to trust others with your life for fleeting, beautiful moments. They tell us that sometimes the difference between triumph and tragedy is a hose coupling, a misheard signal, a misaligned tool. That danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through a crack. That even when you build walls of rules and discipline, a crack, a word, a turn can let chaos in. So, I stand before you, not to scare, but to remind. To remind of the life behind the glamour, the risk behind the speed, the soul behind the steel. Because I believe if we remember these stories, if we carry them, they can teach us more than any victory ever could. If we live knowing how close to the edge those in the pit stand, maybe we hold our victories with more compassion. Maybe we see the cost of every flaw. Maybe we learn to be more careful, more present. Maybe we hug a little tighter. Maybe when we look at those roaring machines, we remember that hidden in the roar are hearts beating fast, hands trembling sometimes, souls praying.